All right. Welcome. People are filing in. Welcome to How to Evaluate Your Coaching Influence, a guided self-assessment for revenue leaders. I am Mark McWatters here at Ambition. I'm joined by some great co-hosts that we'll get to in just a second. As people are filing in here, let's hit the always fun housekeeping items. Attendees, let's stay on mute. As much as I love to hear your dog bark, stay on mute for now, and we're going to get questions in the Q&A. So if you have those, by all means, hop in there and ask. We have a team monitoring those questions. We will do our best to get to each and every one of them. And of course, don't ask. The recording is coming within 24 hours. So for those of you that had other things happen, hey, it's Q4 for a lot of us, right? I get it. If other things happen, all good. Recording is on the way in 24 hours. So great. Let's do some quick intros. I am joined by John Dougan and Casey Ashley. They're each going to do a little bit of their own intro here. They are the stars. And we're just going to move across the screen. So they're going to talk through name, role, team they coach, a little bit about their journey. And let's kick it off with John.
Wow, Mark, I hope I'm not underwhelming after that intro. Team, you can see my name and my title on the slide, so let's not delve too much into that. Global sales performance sounds incredibly sexy, but the truth is I manage three teams, the training team, the coaching team, and the change management team at Workday that support all of our revenue efforts. Mark, a very quick one in terms of this introduction. I've been in coaching probably for the guts of 2 decades now in many different capacities. I'm glad it's been a career that has served me well. The original opportunity was to become a priest in Ireland. So I think I've come a long way now with this NorCal twang that I've developed here in Pleasanton, California.
There's some kind of coaching in that priest, the career path as well, right? And coaching in rugby, I think I saw on LinkedIn, or recent certification. Is that?
Don't let anybody post the score, but the USA Rugby, who I have, adopted since Ireland are rubbish at most sports except rugby, right? They're actually playing right now against Portugal in order to get the last place in the Rugby World Cup next year. So if anybody knows the result or score of that game, please do not post it. I'm trying to objectively avoid it if I can.
Wow, we know we rate if we got over that match. I can't imagine World Cup coming up on Monday. I'm going to have the same vibe happening on calls. Okay, let's pass over to Casey. Casey, tell us a little bit about you.
All right. What's up, everybody? So I don't define myself by one role or position. So I do answer this a little untraditionally. I would define myself as an inspirational sales leader in the B2B SaaS space with the passion for developing others and seeing their growth be elevated by my interactions with them. I currently work at Twilio Segment, leading an enterprise SDR group. And before that, I was a sales leader at Sage Software. I use the word leader very intentionally instead of manager. I really hate that word. And I think throughout my career, I've had the pleasure of working with some extremely smart individuals and learn from them and grow from them and continue to learn every day. I strongly believe in pouring into myself in order to pour into others. And I'm just excited about today's conversation, talking about self-awareness and what it means in leadership. Oh, and by the way, as far as rugby, I don't really follow it, but I root for the All Blacks New Zealand team because of what they represent. It's like, the hookah or the hana? What is it called?
Haka.
Yeah.
Hey, John, let's just pivot and you do your best, whatever that's called again, where they're stomping and intimidating each other.
There's no way I could do that. It wouldn't be appropriate. And listen, it is it gives people a competitive advantage. There certainly does in games until recently. Now Ireland seem to have their measure. That's what's good.
Incredible. Thank you guys for giving the quick intros. I'm Mark here from Ambition, and I am just happy to be with these two. So, and I'm also the only coaching thing I'll say is that when my wife and kids are gone, and I'm like watching a Netflix doc, I'm probably watching some kind of sports leadership doc. Like I want to hear about Phil Jackson and Nick Saban and all these great coaches, and that really fires me up. So to be here with two great coaches today is really exciting. So, guys, let's run through the business case of why coaching is so important. Hopefully, if you're on this, you already know, but let's talk about some of the stats. So 65% of reps indicate that direct manager is the most influential to your success. I find myself talking to frontline managers and oftentimes reassuring them how damn important they are. 65% is a wild number, but it's really not wild if you think about your own direct manager. Like, how much does your own direct manager impact your role? Absolutely critical. So really important role, and you being effective has tremendous ROI. So when a study happens here with Forrester regarding sales coaching, they measured the 3 months before and the 3 months after coaching, and the results were pretty obvious. Like, imagine that, right? With an intentional, systemized, authentic coaching program run at scale, 129% lift 3 months after that program was implemented. So we're going to hear about some programs today too, but I think we all agree that there is serious ROI in doing this well. But if you're going to be a great coach, the first place you have to start with is you. It's kind of like when you get on the airplane, you're with your kid and they're like, hey, if the mask drops, like, you got to make sure you grab yours first. Like, you have to start with you, because if you don't take care of you and know how it feels to be on the other side of you, you're not going to be able to take care of others, right? And so I love this visual here about knowing yourself to lead yourself and leading yourself to know yourself, because this all ties together. And so when our team was putting together content, and they had this line around, what does it feel like to be on the other side of me? As a leader myself, I thought, damn, that's a good question. Like, really, how does that feel? And so we're going to start, as we walk into this webinar together, on self-awareness, because self-awareness is such a huge piece to grounding yourself as a coach. So when we think about self-awareness, again, start with that idea of what does it feel like to be on the other side of me? And I'm going to share a personal example. So I've, all these personality tests that are out there, they basically all tell me the same thing. I'm pretty type A, high energy. I like to get straight to the point. I am not afraid of confrontation, and I just go, right? So to be on the other side of me, that can feel like a lot sometimes. And in my first ever leader role, I worked for AT&T, and I was leading a retail store, and I thought, my leadership approach would be the perfect approach to drive results that AT&T has never seen before. And all I was thinking about is, like, my way will work for everyone. What a naive approach. Like, there were people on my team who were incredibly successful, who weren't type A, whose energy wasn't wild, who didn't like confrontation, right? Like, there are different approaches, and being self-aware is going to help you adjust your coaching style to the people you serve on your team. And so we start here in self-awareness, because if you don't have it, you're going to have a really hard time leading and driving the results that you want. So let's get into some of the bigger topics here. First, just another quick stat, 486 publicly traded companies found that organizations with strong revenue performance had leaders with high levels of self-awareness. So Korn Ferry, these people know what they're talking about. Like, self-awareness is where it starts. And hey, guys, unfortunately, like, we tend to be the ones who struggle most. 4% is pretty rough. And women, frankly, like 1 in 5, that ain't good either, right? So if we can start here in self-awareness, then we can start to evaluate our coaching influence and be better coaches for our teams. So this is your quick frame before we get in to the good stuff with these amazing coaches. So let's get into our first piece around mindset. So as a leader, we're going to think about our self-awareness and what that means for the mindset and how we lead our teams. So I'm going to kick to Casey first and ask him to dive into, how do you think about mindset as a coach, and how your awareness kind of ties into your mindset for your team?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, I think first it's important to note that self-awareness is not always evident and can be developed over time. So not everyone is born self-aware. I know we think we are, but the truth is we really aren't. So I can personally think back into a time early in my career where I completely lacked self-awareness. And honestly, thinking about it now makes me cringe a bit. But in that time, I was trying to be like the person I thought my boss wanted me to be, instead of who I authentically was. And I was coming out, I was militant. I was cutting people off in the middle of their sentence because in my mind, I thought senior leaders and executives, they cut people off. So that means like I'm showing executive presence, which I clearly wasn't. And it wasn't until I was made aware by a mentor of mine, like, why aren't you bringing this person to work? Like, what do you mean? I'm being effective. I'm getting results. I'm getting what needs to be done for my boss. And then they asked me a very important question. They said, well, who did they hire? If they wanted another them, they would just do the job themselves. They said, your team is effective, but they lack life. I thought, wow. So it was really, really hard to hear. You know, I probably had like a slight tear on the side of my eye, right? But it was needed for me to hear that at that moment. And I grew from it. And really ever since that moment, I've told myself that I'm going to be authentically myself. And I'm going to also be more aware of how I'm coming off in different scenarios, truly understanding and knowing my audience, making a conscious effort. And ultimately that conversation has molded me into the leader that I am today.
Wow. I mean, you're making me think about, we hire a new salesperson. They go look at the top sales rep and they try to be just like that top sales rep. It's no different for a manager. You get promoted in, you're a manager, you're looking at other leaders, you're thinking, I need to be like that person if I'm going to win. And what a lesson early on to learn, like, no, you got to be you. You don't have to be them. Like you're the person we hired. Wow. John, that's a tough act to follow. When you think about mindset, tell us a little bit of what's your approach.
Yeah, and Casey, thank you, by the way. That was an incredible story. And listen, I think when it comes to mindset, right, mental acuity, mental performance, I really think that Workday is a pretty sophisticated organization in both our investments and what we've been able to create internally. But for the purposes of this conversation, people are probably asking, well, what are the foundational elements? How do we get started? And I can align completely to Casey's piece, which is, we have this overarching theme that is action through awareness, right? Which is really how we start almost every coaching conversation. And it's, how do I, as the leader, be more aware of myself, more aware of the people around me, and make the right choices for both parties? And so that awareness leading to choices goes through 3 other C's that I hope you can, people on the call can identify. The first one is character. Who am I? What do I want? Why do I want it? That's knowing yourself better, right? So who am I? What do I want? Why do I want it? The second C to that character is commitment. What am I willing to do in order to get where I want to go? And then the third one, and only the third one sequentially, is capability. Where do I sit today that needs to grow and or develop in order to get me where I want to go? And so what you're seeing there, action through awareness, is having a clear vision, but asking of yourself the tough questions that tell you your own why, so that the how then becomes bearable. So I hope for anybody that's trying to figure out, like, how does awareness play a part in the foundational element of coaching. It's understanding self before making choices for you or other people.
All right, team. I told y'all they were good. Thank you, John. That's like I having those 3 C's. I'm over here a student writing those down on my own. Okay, let's keep moving on, because now we're going to talk next about your presence and your mindset, your self-awareness leading to your present. I mean, leading to being aware of how you're going to approach that, your team, the coaching. Now, coming into presence, or let me back up for a second. Your self-awareness leading to mindset, your mindset leading to presence. Your coaching presence is felt by your team. Like, if you ever been on a big sales floor and you walk around and there's like the one team that's high-fiving, doing everything, then you walk to the corner and like it's real quiet over there. You're kind of like afraid, it's dark. And the first thing I think about is who's the leader of that team, because energy is so transferable. And when I think about coaching presence, I think, how is that leader playing up to their strengths? Like in that example I give about, one team's high-fiving, the other team's quiet. That quiet leader might be wildly effective. But they don't need to act like the loud high-five guy, right? Like, they need to play up to their strength as a leader, because that's what's authentically going to come through to their team. And so presence is such a critical thing for us as coaches to think about. And so, John, I'm going to kick it to you first. When you think about approaching coaching presence, and John, do you mind also just sharing a little bit more of like how you oversee this at Workday and all the various levels of coaches, I guess, that kind of fall in your purview? I think that would be really interesting for people to think about.
Yeah. Okay. That was a curveball, by the way, at the last moment, but I like it. So let me go with this one, Mark. We've talked about the introspection, and this, in truth, kind of reflects a little bit on the projection. I always remember this story about when Klay Thompson was drafted by the Golden State Warriors, and he turns up to the first coaching practice that Steve Kerr is leading, and he says, "Today we're going to learn how to dribble." And he thinks, wow, I was drafted, in the first round. The hell am I going to sit here and learn about dribbling, right? I've already done that my entire life. But no, sometimes foundationally focusing on the basics is the most important thing. I would argue focusing on the specifics is the most important thing. So from a presence, right, how I'm going to show up. Objectively, what am I going to help get out of the person I am coaching is the first decision you have to make. The second one, and this is an area I think we fail at, especially in the world of sales, is the focus area. Because the first thing that happens when we ask about coaching is, well, I just need someone to do more of this, X, Y, Z, whatever it happens to be. But very rarely, as the coach, in terms of our presence, do we ask them, well, how well do you know how to do what I'm asking of you? And even before how well, the skill set element, what's the mindset piece, tying back to where we've come from? How confident are you in doing what you need to do? How motivated are you to do what you need to do? Do you see the value or the sense of utility in what I'm asking of you? So when I look at presence, I think it falls under those two areas. What's the specific objective and what's the focus area? Mark, if you don't mind, in terms of how that translates into Workday, I think from Casey probably has a perspective on how that applies to the individual a lot more. So maybe worth going to him, and then we can tack on at the end.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think I echo a lot of what John has said, but when I think about coaching presence, to me, it's just what it says, being present. So it's important that we are available for our people. And I want anyone that's on this call, like, especially if you're a leader, look at your calendar. And if you have no time for your team, you are not being present. So how I personally go about being present for my team is, consistent with my stand-ups, when I'm in office or virtually, Slack communications, team meetings, being consistent with my one-on-ones. I'm also really big on communication. So to me, like, communication is key. So I always tell my teams, I'm going to communicate what I can, when I can, as soon as I can, and making sure that I communicate in a timely manner. I'm also big on explaining the why. We don't always have to agree with the communications, but for me as a leader, I'm going to seek out the why so that I can help my team understand the why. And then I'm going to show them the way that success makes sense for them. We talk about this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about like identity and the individual, but everybody's different. And so you have to find a way to make success make sense for them. And I do random check-ins, temperature checks. I think sometimes as leaders and coaches, we get so caught up on the KPIs and the performance and the metrics and pulling people in to understand what's happening there and what they're doing to mitigate against any type of risk that they may show. But sometimes we just forget to humanize the situation and just check on them. So I'm also present in that sense as well. And the other way that I look at it is my overall presence. So I am someone that I'm going to energize my team. Rarely is my team going to know I'm having a bad day. And believe me, we all have them. But I go by the thought of leave it all at the door, and virtually like whatever room that I'm stepping into is leaving it at that door before I go into that room. And then just leading with optimism. And we talked about it already, and we'll talk about it more, but truly understanding that as a leader, your presence absolutely impacts the day for those around you. So if I'm coming in negative and I'm feeling a certain type of way, it's going to impact the people around me. And so we talk about self-awareness. I try to make sure that I'm aware of that.
I think you bring up a good point that I know I've struggled with, and I've watched others struggle with in their careers. They're like, Mark, I do ask them how their weekend was. It's like, yeah, but you also have your phone like right here, and you're not looking in the screen, and you're doing it to check a box, and they know that. Like, so when you talk about humanizing, like sometimes people struggle with that. And I'm like, the reality is you have to really give a S word, like you gotta care. Can I cuss on these? I don't even know.
People see that too. They see it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So let's talk about building your team identity here. Okay. So one of the things I was thinking about here's another sports analogy for you. But all right, I'm a Tennessee Titans fan. If you pay attention to the NFL at all, the Titans have a very clear identity. We run the ball. We play great defense. So why is that our identity? When the coach looks at what he has on the team, he's got the best running back in the league, and he's got some great defensive players that build a great defense, right? So where I'm going with this is that they aren't trying to be anyone else. They have their identity. And there is so much strength in having and knowing your team identity. And so Casey has some really good ideas about kind of how you look at your team and how you form that identity. So Casey, let's kick it back over to you and maybe walk into your own team's identity.
Yeah, I really love this topic because I feel it's very important to own your team identity, and your team has to be unique to you and the vibe that you guys have, right? My examples were probably going to be more like in office environment. So in office, you talked about the guy that high fives and teams. That is definitely my group, and I'm sure I have like some old team members up here and new team members as well. And they sense that some high energy group, very loud, constant celebrations, high fiving. But we're also my teams have been ones that share best practices. Believe in work hard, play hard, believe in accountability and ownership and teamwork and collaboration. So that's been like really key for my groups. Then I'll give like a couple tips, like in my opinion, like empower your team leaders, delegate tasks, right? Find out who represents the heart and soul of your team. This could be the person that makes sure like new members on the team are welcome. They're celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. Find out who the leaders are on your team give them responsibilities. You'll be amazed that those leaders like on your team, they want to take on like extra things and be seen as that. So give them some extra responsibilities. Find out who your champions and advocates are on the team. And those are the people that no matter what, you always have at least one when you have to give news that maybe not everybody agrees to. They're the advocate that's like, hey guys, like we can do this. We know where he's coming from or she's coming from. So there's always that champion on your team. And find a person who's going to shoot me the real. Like that's what I'm thinking. Who's going to shoot me the real? So when you have a meeting and you deliver some news and you ask, does anyone have any questions? And everybody shakes their head, but you can see like there's something going on. Find that person that's like, hey, what's really going on? What is everybody really feeling? And I guarantee you right now, if you have some ICs on this call, they know where they are as far as those individuals, and they can probably identify the people on the team that I just mentioned. And then we talked about it. Your teams typically represent your presence. So Mark, just like you said, with me, I'm very high energy. I am a morning person, and I don't care if someone isn't really. So I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna talk to everybody. I'm gonna greet everybody to the janitor and above. Doesn't matter. And that energy rubs off on my teams, and they typically are high energy as well. Then you can go around the floor, like you said, the quiet teams, they typically have a quiet leader. The frantic leader typically has like a frantic team, right? So again, be aware as a leader that the energy that you give off rubs off on your team. And then the last thing I'll say about this is I'm always trying to pour into others, like I mentioned. People have come to me and said, I come to you so that I can plug into you to get a recharge. So leaders, I'm going to ask you this to think about, are you that person that people plug into to get a recharge, or are you draining their battery?
Damn, that's good. If anybody's ever read like The Energy Bus, they talk about energy vampires. Like, yeah, don't be draining people's battery. Casey, I love it. All right, John, tell us a little bit about how you think about building a team identity.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to strap in for this one, Mark. I'll try and do this as succinctly as I possibly can. This is the question that everybody wants to answer, right? Which legitimately is, how do we build a coaching culture? Let's be very clear. Culture in this terms is just how we do things around here. So we kind of fumbled right onto what I'm about to show as a discovery. We talked about introspection and projection. We put these leaders, 29 of them specifically, through this program we call Level Up internally. It's actually why we won this award behind me here. So I'll try and give people the details that they'd want from it. In Level Up, at an introspective level, people focused on setting goals, understanding their motivation, establishing beliefs and regulating their emotions, getting things done, building momentum when you had it, and handling change when you didn't. At a projected level, that's at a team level, that goal setting turned into how do you set a vision, motivation into mission, beliefs and emotions into values and or standards, getting it done, influence and execution, and obviously building momentum and handling change remained the same. When we put our leaders through this program, we focused on a quarterly level, the journeys that they would go on. So for example, they would go through the journey of vision, mission, values together. At the start of the quarter, we assessed their organizational sentiment. And at the end of the quarter, we assessed their organizational sentiment and worked with them as leaders in order to really embed and reinforce principles that they had learned around each of the areas. What we found was incredible. Based on the organizational sentiment, this is VPs, so they had about 40 to 50 people in their organizations that were assessed as part of this. What we saw was and I've got to get this right, we saw a 5.6, so a 6% lift in terms of our ability to set a brand new vision. So their understanding, their clarity around their goals and their roles to achieve it. From a mission standpoint, we didn't see that significant a lift. It was, 1.22%. So, relatively insignificant from a data standpoint. But what we did find was from a values and standards that those teams who had clearly established them as a result When we looked at the organizational sentiment, that changed by 18%. Now, what is incredible about each of those leaders, 29 respectively, so a small subsection, probably a quarter of our VPs, when we took an overall benchmark score based on our organizational sentiment tool, they all moved from below 90% as a threshold to above 90% as a threshold. When they moved above that threshold from an organizational standpoint, right, organizational sentiment standpoint, their chances of hitting quota with a participation rate that was plus 7% on our average doubled.
Wow.
So their chances of hitting quota with a percentage increase that was 7% doubled. If you want an example of what those values look like, I can give you my own teams. I have 3 values that my team live and die by. The first one is no one alone. I don't know about you guys, but I think we live in a world now where work and personal life is blended in some degree, whatever we choose that to be. The one thing I'll not take is finger pointing, right? I very rarely do I see people be successful alone, so why would they feel alone? And what I don't need is people finger pointing to say, I'd rather they go, well, listen, that didn't work out. What can we all do to help that person out? That's a good cultural thing. The second one is be valuable, right? I'm a support function for our sales organization. I don't want to do anything that will not be accepted, consumed, or used by that audience. And I certainly won't do anything that isn't contextual, relevant, and applicable to them, because otherwise I'm wasting my time. And then the third one is see it through, right? And this comes back to the awareness piece potentially. If you believe in something so vehemently that you think it's going to impact the audience that you serve, see it through, like get after it. If you believe in it, then I believe in it. That's kind of so those are our 3 values. And we've proven at Workday that when you have clear values or standards, they materially make an impact on performance.
For sales leaders, I'm going to go back to the first one about not going it alone. Like, this is such a common struggle because a lot of sales leaders are former super reps that did a lot on their own. And like, I lead an enterprise team right now. Enterprise sellers tend to be the most lone wolf of the group, even though they probably need more than anybody. And I had a boss years ago who his mantra was just never lose alone. I don't care if you lose an op. I just want to make sure that you had other people helping you try to win. Because if you lose alone, that's on you. But if we lose as a team, that's on us. And like, that's how I've certainly that's burned in my brain for years as I'm now leading other teams of just guys, like, I can handle a loss, but I can't handle losing by yourself. And for leaders, there's so much in that too. You put pressure on yourself to have every answer, be the one who is the reason why you win or lose as a team. And the reality is, like, it's a team sport. Like, everybody needs to be in this together. And I love that that's something that you all are embodying on yours, John. Okay, let's talk about support. So we hit on this a little bit with just being present, frankly, like in conversations. But John, when you think about just how you support your people and how you encourage the coaches at Workday to support theirs, what comes to mind here?
Yeah, and I hope that in this answer, people start to see the interlock of the different topics that we've talked through. I'm going to tie support back to mindset, because, and it does kind of run through the specificity and objectives that we were trying to set. So we did this mindset assessment at Workday, where we evaluated 13 non-cognitive behaviors that ultimately showed the instinct of the said VPs that we were working on. And so it was their proclivity to act in a certain way to a stimulus, their response, if you will. When we did this assessment, we then retrofitted it to the performance data that I give you, hitting quota with the participation rate mentioned. What we found out is there was a significant gap between our high performers and our core performers. And we could actually give it a percentile points attribution. So, for example, when it came to hardiness, our ability to respond to adversity, there was a 36 percentile delta between our high performers and core. When it came to self-discipline, there was a 22%, how we organize ourselves in order to achieve a personal or a team goal. And the third one was grit, 18%. It was actually the perpetuity of that hardiness, so how we persevere towards a goal over time. What is amazing is that then gave us, we entered a co-op with other organizations, and that gave us an opportunity to really focus our support efforts on what the field leaders needed. So what did we do? We focused on hardiness, we focused on self-discipline, we focused on grit. Over the period of a year, we took a mindset assessment at the start and a mindset assessment all over towards the end. And we were amazed by the growth. The other organizations in the co-op had an average across drive, willpower, resilience, integrity. That's just the clusters of the non-cognitive behaviors. They had a lift of 10%. Whereas when we looked at ourselves, our lift was at 35%. And the reason I bring that up is not some sort of humble brag. It's because every other organization in the co-op focused on the entire breadth of what they needed to support their leaders in all of those areas that I mentioned: drive, willpower, resilience, and integrity. We have integrity as a core value. We realized that we needed to focus on resilience. We focused on resilience, and our lift was 3x what theirs was. So the reason I share that is when it comes to support and how you're present for your people, ensure that what you're working on, whether it's from a large program standpoint or an individual one-on-one, that you're focused on where they need support, whether that's amplifying what they do well and extracting the best from them in that sense, or extracting some self-awareness around where they might be struggling, need to grow or develop, and then focus on that. That's it, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, resiliency, grit, like I'm going into what's happening right now in the macro with the economy. Like I think about that there's a lot of leaders who've never gone through they went through COVID, which was like a blip of a economic crisis. Like now it's looming larger, and it's like there's a lot of leaders who haven't been through that before, and having that resiliency, having that grit is going to be incredibly important. Okay, Casey, tell us a little bit. I know this is something you're passionate about too, that you already hit on a little bit with tips about being present in those conversations. What would you add to what John shared?
First, I just want to say, I hope everyone is taking some nuggets from John, because I'm over here, I'm just glad we're getting the recording so I can write some of this stuff down. Just very great stuff. As far as support, one thing that I did want to mention is, talk about your environment, like we talked about, like your team identity. I want to talk a little bit about team environment. It should be a safe space for your team where you can have those tough conversations, where you can welcome feedback, welcome opinions, and actually value those opinions and experiment ideas. I do want to say, like, we don't experiment enough with ideas, and experiments drive innovation. So I just want to talk a little bit about the overall environment. Make sure that you're doing that as leaders. But as far as support itself, I think it goes back to being available, that we talked about before. And to me, people are the foundation, they're the engine. So my interactions with anyone, especially people on my team, I try to give them the spotlight, limit distractions. I do put everything on pause. And then most importantly, I try to really make a conscious effort of understanding my people, like what motivates the individual. There's ways to lead to the actual team, but then I think the most impactful and effective leaders understand what motivates each individual, right? Some people may be motivated to be the top person. Some people may be motivated to have enough money to invest. And so you want to know these things so that you can speak their language. And then weekly one-on-ones, obviously. And then something that's really dear to me is personal development. So I want to support people in becoming better versions of themselves, but not just teach them skills that are long-lasting for my team or the organization. I want them to develop skills that they can use outside of the team, and maybe, heck, even another organization eventually, right? And then always ask one question: how can I best support you? But I really mean it. I really mean it when I ask it. And then the other thing is just knowing that everybody is different and motivated by different things, being authentic to yourself and your approach when you're supporting them.
Yeah, if in your one-on-one conversation you're not asking how can I help you or how can I get you unstuck or some form of that question, like that's such an easy tidbit. Okay, we got 5 minutes, so we'll be kind of quick on accountability. John, I'm actually going to come back to you first here for just what metrics do you track for like coaching effectiveness? You've already rattled off several and what you all measured. But are there any that you would like especially highlight here for the group?
Listen, Mark, there's lots, being truthful. Let me relate a couple to what we've talked about already so that there's some journey in that. When I think about accountability, I think it's holding ourselves accountable to a series of standards. We talked about standards already, so that our people want to emulate and repeat that, as in hold themselves accountable to their own standards that they've developed as a result of the relationship that you have. I can give you an example, right? And we'll focus on the awareness and choices piece, because I think that's what you can hold people accountable to, being more aware, making better choices. When I look at that and I look at the examples I gave you, we found that those that went through the journey, just by being more aware of the areas they needed to develop, like hardiness, grit, self-discipline, actually improved. They got a lift over the year in doing it. So we measured that. But what was amazing is we also measured people's participation. And when we measured participation, right, so high participation being 70% of the coaching calls you were on, you consumed 70% plus of the content. We had low performers that was less than 50, right, and in between was the delta. When we analyzed the amount of people who went to club who reported for leaders that invested in themselves by being highly participative versus the low, we found that 46% of the people that reported into leaders who invested in themselves went to club, whereas only 23% of the low invested leaders went to club. That's a huge
Wow.
That doesn't tell us, there's no correlation. There's no causation there. Don't get me wrong, Mark. But here's what it tells you. It tells you that people who work for leaders who invest in themselves are more likely to be successful. I don't care how you think about accountability or different measurements, metrics, leading, lagging indicators, because they're all there. They're always going to be there. One element when it comes to coaching accountability is, does the person develop themselves that leads others? That's
Imagine being in your interview and asking the hiring manager, how are you currently investing in yourself? Like what a powerful way to as a leader, I'm sitting here asking myself that question, right? I think everybody is, and that's the point. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to jump to our last piece here about Be Greater. And Casey, we'll come to you first. Here at Ambition, heading into 2023, we've got this Be Greater theme. We got t-shirts. We got a new logo here, but we're posing this question to you all: of what is your top coaching tip to be greater next year and beyond? Casey, I'm putting you on the spot here. Top coaching tip to be greater next year.
So top, okay. All right, a lot of things come to mind, but I'm going to say this one. Lead with intention, not emotion. So what I mean by that is make decisions that are sound and not just based off of a moment of how you feel. So have intention with everything that you do as you lead these groups.
I love it. Thank you. John.
Mark, I hope this doesn't become some sort of slogan, right? But I feel like embrace the change is the best advice I can give to anybody. Be open-minded to what's new, what you haven't experienced before, and react to that in due kind. If you can, create a pause between the stimulus and your reaction, then I would consider you to be a fairly developed leader who's ready for that.
I love it. The thing that I'm going to add for your coaching tip, for those managers out there that feel all the pressure that they got to have every answer, be vulnerable and ask people on your team. You will be stunned when they might have a better idea than you do. And that is building a high-performing team. When you have that peer-to-peer accountability, when they manage up, Like, these are things you can create by building trust within your org, and don't be afraid to ask them for their ideas. All right, John, Casey, you guys have been tremendous. I'm sure they can find you on LinkedIn for all the people who joined. Thanks so much for the group for investing time with us. Hopefully you're walking away with some really tactical tips of how you can be a better coach heading into the new year. But thanks again for joining us here at Ambition, and we look forward to the next one. Everybody have a great Friday, and to the U.S. folks, a good Thanksgiving. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Take care, guys.